Well, hello there. Welcome back to the I Am Still Woman podcast, a show made by women for women. Just a reminder, our show seeks to remind women dealing with fertility challenges that you are not alone. And I am your host, Candy Manning. How many of us women listening to this podcast now are of childbearing age who continue to get the age old questions of, oh, so when are you going to have a baby? Your biological clock is ticking. Don't you think it's time you hurry up and find a husband and get a baby? I don't understand. Don't you want kids? Why are you waiting so long? What's there to wait? Kids are great. Don't you want them? Meanwhile, you're dealing with your own challenges silently. Why is everyone else watching and worrying about my clock or your clock even? Today, we have a special guest who will talk about being in her 30s and her experience with all eyes on her clock. I remember after I got married, I went to church, and one of the church sisters came over to me and congratulated us on our marriage, right? While in the same breath proceeded to say, so, when can we expect to see babies? I immediately started crying, right? Was the statement meant to be hurtful? No. Do I think that she meant any harm? Absolutely not. However, she triggered me without knowing, and this happens to a lot more women than we know about. At this point, it was way too fresh for me, right? Just a year prior to this, the doctor discussed with me the possibilities of me getting pregnant with my eggs, whose quality was depreciating every day. What do you mean my egg quality is depreciating? I thought I was born with all the eggs I was going to have, and then I could always have eggs, and I could use my eggs whenever I wanted to. No, that's just not how it works. So today we're going to explore the topic of egg quality. There's more to getting pregnant than having intercourse during your time of ovulation, right? Where, the sperm meets the egg and then they have a dance together, then they fertilize each other, and then all of a sudden, 9 months later, boom, there's a baby. That's not always how it works. Who remembers the movie Look Who's Talking with John Travolta and Kirstie Alley? In the beginning of the movie, right, there shows two people doing a do, making love, having sex, whatever you want to call it. And if you have not seen that movie, you need to go back and watch it. It's hilarious. If for nothing, just watch the first 10 minutes of the movie. Bam, though, he ejaculates, and off the happy sperm, they just shoot out, millions of them, and they just run. They're fighting, and some are falling off as they're going. So many of them, and then they finally, one gets to the place where the egg is being housed. She's nice and warm and just sitting there relaxing. She's scared. She doesn't want him touching her, and so she's fighting. Everything around her is fighting off the sperm, or whatever the case might be, to keep her protected and safe. Needless to say, the one sperm finally gets through to her, right? Penetrates her, and then therefore, there we go. We have an embryo or a fertilized egg, right? It's not that easy, especially for a woman with endometriosis, right? You're thinking that with regards to the process already as it is, it's such a difficult situation, even though to some it might be easy. But you have the sperm in this place that it's never been in before, so it has no way of protecting itself. It doesn't know what it's going to come up against. It doesn't know all the scar tissues that's awaiting it whenever it comes out, and when it comes in, and it knows where it's supposed to go, what it's supposed to find. How it knows that, I don't know, but he knows what it's supposed to find, and it's going and it's trying to get there. But then all these other things are in the way. Scar tissue on your bowels, scar tissue on your ovaries, scar tissues on your cervix. I mean, all along the way, there are challenges for the sperm to get there. By the time they get there, they're tired or they don't even make it there. And for the one that may make it into that space where it can fertilize the egg, where the egg might be waiting for it, sometimes they get there and there's no egg waiting for it. But if it gets there and there is an egg, chances are, it doesn't know what kind of egg it's going to meet. If it's going to meet an egg that has low quality, so low of a quality that it won't even fertilize, or if it's going to meet a viable egg, one that they'll mesh, and then they'll create this beautiful baby at the end. But you never know what is going to happen. So, as it relates to a woman with endometriosis, it is more difficult in that respect because there are so many other hazards in in the space for the sperm to have to fight through in order to get to where it needs to be and to do what it needs to do. So, what is this egg quality thing that I'm talking about? So, in order to determine the quality of your eggs, right, a multitude of tests must be ran, one being the ovarian reserve testing. I remember when I first went to my GYN, my fertility doctor at Penn, he was so nice. He was very, very nice. He ensured that I did not, Dr. Sonheimer was his name. And he was very kind when he was talking to me about my fertility journey that I could essentially be going on, and what the challenges would be if my egg quality was not where it needed to be, and chances are with endometriosis where my egg quality could potentially be, and ran all the tests that he could possibly run to give me all the answers that I need. But he was very kind, very nice. Needless to say, ladies, when you find your GYN, make sure that they are very understanding of you, that your health is placed first, and they step outside of their space to believe you when you tell them about your pain. If they do not believe you, find another doctor, because you only can tell what your pain is. Anyways, a woman is born with all of the eggs she'll ever have, approximately 1 to 2 million, right? The eggs, they're in the form of follicles, and they're just sitting there waiting patiently to do what they do. Some of them dissolve or something happens to them, but as you get older, you lose your eggs, right? So they diminish essentially over time. By the time a woman reaches puberty, she will have around 300,000 potential eggs in her ovarian reserve. During her reproductive years, only a few hundred eggs will actually be ovulated. At the age of 25, 75% of a woman's eggs are normal. At 35, about 50% of a woman's eggs are normal. Now, this is in a normal woman, right? And by the time a woman reaches 40, about 10 to 15% of her eggs are normal. Drastic changes happen as you transition through age, right? Unfortunately, abnormal eggs will develop into abnormal embryos, which can create other issues as you transition through the process of having a baby and going through the maternity space. Based on your age, medical history, and the results of your ovarian reserve testing, a fertility treatment plan can be created by your medical professional. A series of tests is then done to determine your fertility. So, one of those tests is the FSH, follicle stimulating hormone test. So, the FSH is critical in follicle development. Remember, we talked about follicles being what we call our eggs within the ovaries. FSH is the way that the pituitary gland in the brain communicates with the ovaries. It signals the ovaries that it's time to make an egg each month. As the eggs decrease in quality, they are more resistant to FSH, and it takes more and more FSH to keep the cycle progressing. Therefore, the higher the FSH value, the lower the quality of the eggs. By measuring a woman's baseline FSH on day 3 of your cycle, the doctors get an indication as to whether a woman has normal ovarian reserve. They are looking at how hard her body needs to step on the gas, essentially, early in the menstrual cycle to get a follicle growing. Therefore, if the baseline FSH is elevated, the ovarian reserve, which tells you how many eggs are left, is reduced. Sometimes the egg quality is also reduced. Now, with that said, moving on to the E2 or the estradiol or however they pronounce it. This is a steroid hormone secreted into circulation by the granulosa cells of developing ovarian follicles. Depending on the time of your menstrual cycle, the hormone levels will fluctuate between 10 and 300, pg per milliliter, or however they measure it. For the ovarian reserve testing, clinicians typically assess E2 levels at days 2 or 3 of your menstrual cycle. This particular estradiol in IVF, it actually supports the natural estrogen needs, right? So it thickens the uterine lining so that it prepares it for implantation. It also helps the placenta to function, boosts blood flow to the uterus, and prepares the body to breastfeed after birth. Then you've got the AMH, which is the anti-Mullerian hormone. This hormone helps with the ovarian follicles, right? So it is a glycoprotein released by the granulosa cells of early developing eggs that help protect and mature the eggs. Um, according to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the production of AMH is reflective of your ovarian reserve. Over a lifetime, as the number of eggs decrease, the granulosa cells decrease and AMH also decreases. AMH gives an estimate of the total number of eggs that are remaining in the ovaries. However, it doesn't tell you whether or not the quality of the eggs are viable. Uh, just to give you an understanding of what we're talking about as it relates to quality of eggs, right? Put a number to everything. So the normal person would have an AMH level of, by at the age of 25, of 3.0 nanograms per milliliter. That's a normal person. That's considered normal. 30 years old, it drops to 2.5 nanograms per milliliter, right? Still in a normal range, but as you can see, it's decreasing, right? At 35 years old, you're looking at 1.5 nanograms per milliliter, which again, it's now teetering on the low normal range, but it's still normal. Anything below a 1 is going to be low, teetering on the very low situation, right? And that's normally for women in their 40s and 45s heading towards menopause. In my situation, I had my egg quality at 34 years old was less than a 1. So it was very low. So only God knows what the quality is now, because that was 4 years ago. In order for the doctors to measure these follicles, they have to do these transvaginal ultrasounds. Now, it's just an ultrasound, but imagine doing these ultrasounds every other day during your cycle, right? So when I was going through IVF, I had to go to the doctor whenever they did a baseline on, what was it? I had to call him when my first day of my period was, and then they did the baseline while my cycle was on. So of course, imagine as a woman, I bleed, very, 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 very heavy, and I'm laying there, and there's just stuff just everywhere. It was the most, I don't want to, it wasn't degrading necessarily. It just was uncomfortable. It was a very uncomfortable situation where I'm laying there, because essentially when a cycle comes on as a woman, I don't know about many of you women, but for me, I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to I don't do certain things. I don't wear swimsuits. I don't do, because I never want for people to, I don't want for people to see it. But now I'm laying there on the bed, and they're going through, and they're measuring, and there's stuff everywhere. It's just the most uncomfortable situation. But whatever, you have to do what you have to do. But the doctors do these ultrasounds to count the number of follicles that your body is producing during a certain time period, and then especially if you've got issues with egg quality, the smaller number of follicles means that you have problems with egg quality and quantity, which is my situation. The first time I did the IVF procedure with the fertility drugs, my body produced no eggs. Not one viable follicle was produced, not one, and sent me into a spiral, and almost lost my mind, and I had to take away myself, disappear, which we'll talk about that later. And when we're talking about coping mechanisms and dealing with loss and pain, and how everybody deals with things differently. And my way of dealing with it may be different from somebody else's, but it worked for me. So don't let anybody tell you that your way is not the best. I mean, hopefully you're not doing something that's detrimental to your life, but then in that case, we have to have a different conversation. But for me, it was traveling, right? I just got away. Needless to say, it is very important for women to understand the importance of their egg quality if they want to have children later on, right? I highly suggest, and a friend of mine told me years ago, she said, you're with this person for a very long time, and they don't seem like they're willing to or ready to have children. If you want to have children, I suggest you freeze your eggs. Freeze your eggs. And at the time I was in my 20s, I didn't think about it, because I didn't want to pay the money. It was expensive. with the fertility drugs and everything, I had to pay for it out of hand, and then to pay for the storage fee of storing the eggs every year. I mean, it was pricey, and I'm like, well, no, it's fine. I'll be able to have children.